Tonight on EIV News at 9, Mayor of Brockton, Bill Carpenter, is being accused of skimming taxpayer money for personal use.
And Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey is launching a new hotline in response to post-election harassment of minorities.
And Natick police are investigating a hate crime that occurred last Thursday where a resident found multiple threatening letters in his mailbox. We'll have the full story coming up.
From the studios at Emerson College, tonight on EIV News.
Hello and welcome to EIV News at 9. I'm Maddie Crichton.
And I'm Rob Way. We begin with tonight's top stories.
The mayor of Brockton is being accused of skimming taxpayer money for personal use. Mayor Bill Carpenter allegedly used the money to pay for a college language course in Creole. The city is also investigating the mayor for $8,000 worth of granite that went missing. The granite was ordered for the reconstruction of City Hall and was reordered when it came in the wrong color. The first shipment is nowhere to be found. Last June, Carpenter ran into issues with the law when he got his license suspended for not paying state taxes. He came under fire after having police detail drive him around.
Chemicals found in New Hampshire drinking water are being blamed for causing health problems, including a rare childhood cancer condition. A group of concerned citizens from Rye, New Hampshire reported several cancer clusters to the Department of Health and Human Services in March 2014. The cancer clusters, defined by the CDC as a greater than expected number of cancer cases found in people in a certain geographic location, are now being looked into by Maggie Hassan's Cancer Cluster Task Force. The task force met with and worried citizens on November 9th to discuss their recommendations after the clusters drew the attention of State Representative and Task Force member Mindy Messmer. The state is working with landfill groups to finance the expansion of public water systems to the affected homes. Meanwhile, residents are provided bottled water.
4 workers were injured in Kingston, Massachusetts after a construction accident Monday afternoon. According to officials, the wall of the second floor of an unfinished house on Christmas Tree Lane crashed as the workers were trying to lift it into place. One worker was taken by a medical helicopter to bring in Women's Hospital for back injuries, while another was taken to South Shore Hospital with unknown but serious injuries. The other 2 workers suffered minor injuries. All 4 workers are expected to be okay. Construction on the house is halted as the Occupational Safety Health Administration investigates the accident.
A Natick, Massachusetts resident found multiple hateful letters in his mailbox Thursday night. According to the police, there were a series of 3 letters, 2 typed and 1 handwritten. The letters detailed threats directed at the homeowner's black roommate in response to, quote, Donald Trump reclaiming the country. Natick Police Chief James Hicks said that they are investigating this as a hate crime, and for anyone with any information that they may assist and call the Natick Police.
2 alleged Cape Cod heroin traffickers were arrested Thursday evening, according to police. 34-year-old John M. Benavidez of Hyannis and 26-year-old Ashley M. Carr of Falmouth were arrested at a traffic stop on outstanding warrants. After the arrest, Yarmouth police got a warrant to search Benavidez's home and found at least 41 grams of suspected heroin, prescription pills, and more than $2,000 in cash, reports NECN. The 2 have been charged with possession, conspiracy to violate drug laws, and heroin trafficking.
We now go to our political correspondent, Shayna Ferreira, for a look at what's going on this week in Washington.
What can you tell us, Shayna?
Thanks, guys. Not even one day after Donald Trump's election, protests broke out in U.S. cities across the country, including Boston. Police estimate that 6,000 protesters gathered at the Boston Common in protest of the election of the New York businessman. In addition, other cities included New York, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia, all protesting against the measures proposed by the president-elect, including the deportation of undocumented immigrants. Trump took to Twitter, accusing the protesters of being unfair towards his win and saying they are all incited by the media. The new Trump administration has already begun appointing people to take on major roles in the cabinet. Trump has appointed Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus as the White House Chief of Staff. Additionally, the president-elect announced the appointment of Stephen Bannon to his chief strategist and senior counselor. one grassroots supporter of the Trump campaign. Analysts say these appointments could be in part to secure a Republican control in each branch of government for the duration of the administration and beyond. And the former Secretary of State continues to make headlines after the election, blaming FBI Director James Comey for her stunning loss. Comey reopened the investigation into the use of her email server just before Americans casted their vote for president. The investigation was cleared by the FBI 2 days before the election. Clinton told donors that Comey's letter was, quote, groundless and baseless, stopping her campaign's momentum. Clinton has denied to comment on the next steps for her, but she says she won't stop fighting for Americans.
On Monday, President Obama held his first press conference since Donald Trump won the election, trying to convince anxious Americans that the country will be safe in Trump's hands. Despite previously referring to Trump as, quote, woefully unprepared and unable to handle the nuclear codes, the president tried to reaffirm the United States to his commitment to NATO, promising that the president-elect is just as committed to the organization as he is.
Obama also emphasized his role in creating a smooth transition process into the presidency for Trump, hoping that if Trump is given the space, he will be able to transition smoothly into the White House, despite the billionaire's lack of political experience. Obama is currently traveling to Peru, Greece, and Germany for his last foreign trip of his presidency, while the Trump administration prepares to take over the White House after the inauguration on January 20th.
We are now joined at the desk with correspondent Paul Ross, our political commentator, to discuss President Obama's first press conference after Donald Trump's election win. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you think of the change in tone that Barack Obama had from campaigning with Hillary Clinton to now holding a press conference after the election?
Well, I think it's very interesting. The tone that Barack Obama wanted to have during the campaign was to unite the Democratic Party. And unfortunately for the Democrats, it didn't happen. So once Donald Trump became President-elect Donald Trump, he started to move towards, oh, I have to get along with Donald Trump now because he's President-elect. He's not just a candidate for another party. I can't treat him partisanly. So the Democrats, and specifically Barack Obama, need to go and decide how are they going to treat Donald Trump when he goes into power, into office, and at the same time, how is President Obama going to transition into citizen Obama?
And do you think that President Obama will be out campaigning for Democrats in the years to come?
I feel as though Barack Obama will at first take a little bit of a rest, but afterwards I think that he's going to start campaigning for Democrats by 2018. At the same time, he's going to need to go and take time off because he was president for 8 years. So you'll see, like Bill Clinton, he let Hillary go and take over, and she became senator from New York. But President Obama might actually step in more and might be more active for the Democrats.
Great. We also have Shayna Ferreira with us now. What do you think President Obama and the Obama family will be doing while Trump has his first years in the presidency?
Well, definitely. I mean, I agree. I think he definitely will take a rest. He and Michelle have really dedicated themselves, not just to being, president and first lady, but also kind of pushing initiatives aside from just an executive branch standpoint. I mean, they're going to speak, they're going to be in Washington, D.C. They're waiting for Sasha to graduate high school, which admirable parents for not having, wanting to move her out of her comfort zone. So definitely they kind of want to recuperate from these last 8 years. I mean, Michelle Obama says she can't wait to just drive in a car and stick her head out the window. So you can't blame her for that. So definitely some normal lives. People keep speculating maybe she can run for president because she is so loved, but definitely just a rest for both of them as they want to transition back to normal life.
All right, thanks so much for you both joining us. We go now to EIV reporter Moses Small, live in the Boston Common, where several peaceful protests have occurred in the past week following the election of Donald Trump. Moses?
This past week, we've been seeing protests around the country after Donald Trump's election, and these protests are in large part due to his divisive comments in the past. So we're seeing groups such as minorities, women, and immigrants come out because they feel pushed away by his rhetoric in previous times. And even this past week in Boston, we've seen 6,000 people effectively shut down Boylston Street with the biggest hashtag, Not My President. So we're really seeing an issue of representation. And Donald Trump seems to be moving his views more towards the mainstream, but we sure have surprises to come, even as he moves towards the middle in one of the most contentious elections in recent history.
My body, my choice. Her body, her choice. My body, my choice. Her body, her choice. My body, my choice. Her body, her choice. We're America. Who's America? We're America. Who's America? We're America. Who's America? We're America. High, they go low. We go high. They go low. We go high.
Reporting for EIV News in the Boston Commons, I'm Moses Small.
All right, thanks so much, Moses. As anti-Trump gatherings continue to pop up across the country, there have been widespread reports of harassment against minorities whose assailants have invoked Donald Trump. Milford residents are finding Ku Klux Klan materials in their driveway. Among other materials, residents are finding the KKK newspaper, The Crusader, which calls itself the premier voice of the white resistance. Milford officials believe those responsible come from out of state, as the newspaper is printed in Arkansas. Milford Police Chief Tom McLaughlin also received the paper and said, quote, "On a personal level, it's pretty offensive. On a professional level, it's protected by the Constitution."
Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey is launching a new hotline in response to post-election harassment of minorities. The Office of the Attorney General will monitor the hotline to respond to threats, harassment, or violence against racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, women, immigrants, or LGBT individuals. Residents can call the hotline or fill out an online civil rights complaint form. The office says it will be tracking reports and passing them on to law enforcement officials. Healey says the hotline is directly related to the increased number of incidents following the election of Donald Trump.
Coming up after the break, Ashland, Massachusetts is looking to delay the opening of marijuana dispensaries in their town after the passing of ballot question 4.
And find out how Bostonians took to spreading love in various MBTA train stations after Trump's election.
And weather correspondent Christina Gesford will have the latest on what tomorrow's weather will bring. Stick around.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Box Score. Thank you so much for joining us. We are now going to be taking questions at our press conference immediately. Tough show. Tough. It was a good show this week. Town played well. Can't tell you the effect that Tommy had on us all the way up and down the rundown. Very impressed this week with the crew. Did all their work inside and outside of the locker room and inside the coaches' suites. I think we have a good chance next week against Syracuse before we take on Missouri. Then we'll get a little bit of a bye when we take on Ohio at the end of the month. But starting the right, do we have any questions? Anything? Anyone in the middle? Anyone at all? Typical.
Started.
Welcome back. We're now joined in studio by our weather correspondent, Christina Gesford.
Christina, what do you have for us?
Well, guys, the storm has been ramping up all day, so as it reaches Boston, we're getting 20 to 30 mile per hour winds coming in off the water, holding the temperatures in the 50s, but with a raw feel. There are potential thunderstorms this evening as those bands of rain move in, looking at about an inch of rain right now. It's a rainy, foggy day in Boston, but things will be looking brighter and drier tomorrow and through the rest of the week. And speaking of that storm, there are 2 severe weather alerts in Suffolk County today as the storm system makes its way up, working off the coast. One for bands of heavy rain this afternoon into this evening that could cause localized urban street flooding. And the other for a coastal flood advisory midday as king tides, the highest tides of the year, are caused by this week's supermoon. Even on a sunny, calm day, these king tides can cause flooding in low-lying, vulnerable areas, but that combined with an onshore flow causes flashover on shore roads. There is some flooding along the low-lying shoreline areas from Salisbury to Plymouth. But there's good news. You won't have to keep those rain boots out for long. As today's storm lifts out overnight, tomorrow we're looking at above average temperatures close to 60. A light westerly wind between 10 and 15 miles per hour. Cloudy skies early, but those clouds breaking up soon after and gradually opening up to a partial clearing, and then clear skies into the night with a slightly chillier 42 degrees.
Thanks so much, Christina. Ashland, Massachusetts is looking to delay the opening of marijuana dispensaries in their town after the passing of ballot question 4. The delay was proposed by the Board of Selectmen, who asked for a study of regulation and zoning issues that may come up with the dispensaries. Ashland Town Manager Michael Herbert told NECN that the board wants to make an accurate decision without placing a permanent ban on the dispensaries. A meeting will be held in 2 weeks to vote on whether the town should suspend the opening of the recreational marijuana dispensary.
In light of question 4, employers will also have the ability to prohibit their employees from marijuana use in safety-sensitive situations like operating machinery. The Associated General Contractors of Massachusetts said in a statement, quote, "We have to balance the will of the community against the well-being of the construction industry. Companies funded by the federal government will also be able to ban marijuana. On or off-duty bans on marijuana use are unlikely except for employees of private companies."
The MBTA is conducting a survey to determine whether or not it should run an overnight bus service. The survey is available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese on the MBTA's website until December 16th. A Boston nonprofit, Transit Matters, already proposed creating a bus service to run between 1 and 5 a.m. last April. A bus service, Bridge, also gave the MBTA a bid for the service. Bridge's plan will cost the MBTA $85 per vehicle per hour, which is almost $50 less than what the MBTA-owned buses cost per hour. Possible fares for the bus are still unknown.
After Trump's election, Bostonians took to spreading love in various MBTA train stations. Some handed out pins and cards with a list of resources for human rights and LGBT organizations in solidarity. Facebook group Subway Therapy posted encouraging and loving sticky notes throughout the Park Street T-stop. Community members responded by posting these pictures on social media with the hashtag Subway Therapy. The MBTA issued a statement stating that they did not pre-approve the notes, but they are not going to prevent anyone from posting them or leaving one. The groups who started posting the notes promised to take them down once the anxiety from the election has passed. And we're now joined by our international correspondent, Carly Wickham, for a look at what's happening around the world. Carly, what can you tell us?
Thanks, Maddie. Well, Donald Trump reached out to Russian leader Vladimir Putin to discuss relations between the two countries. After their phone conversation on Monday, the Kremlin released a statement saying that both leaders believe the relationship between the two countries was not as strong as it could have been and plan to work together over the next 4 years to improve it. A representative from Trump's office also released a statement saying that Putin originally called simply to congratulate the new president-elect, but the conversation went on to discuss, quote, strategic economic issues and how to best improve the long-term relationship between the two countries. Donald Trump's views on Putin have been pitting him against many major players in the Republican Party, as we all saw in the election. And now after these released statements, there has been conversation about how the Pentagon will be dealing with such conversations. A U.S. warship has been sent to New Zealand to aid in an evacuation this week. Hundreds of tourists and residents have been stranded in Kayakera, New Zealand since the 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck, leaving 2 people dead. The earthquake also triggered a small tsunami in the town, which left citizens without water supplies and sewer systems. The Defense Force has already begun evacuating citizens by ferry as well as by helicopter. However, the helicopter squad was only able to carry about 19 citizens at a time, leaving the nation worried about a week-long or possibly longer mission. The U.S. ship was set to arrive in New Zealand this morning and should be able to effectively transport hundreds of people in faster time than the country has seen thus far. This is the first time that a U.S. battleship has been in New Zealand's territory for 30 years, ending a military stalemate between the two countries. And lastly, according to a leaked government memo, Britain has no real Brexit strategies in place. The memo detailed a conflict between Prime Minister Theresa May's plan to control key points on the exit from the European Union, while her cabinet is at a complete deadlock. The document also stated that as a result of the political feud, as well as the changing political climate all over Europe, there may not be any decisions made on how to initiate the break for another 6 months. Critics of the Conservative Party are saying that this is simply another example of how the current government is putting political survival over a thriving British economy. The Prime Minister's spokeswoman released a statement saying the document was completely unsolicited and does not reflect the true state of Brexit planning.
Thank you, Carly. Now, when do you think British leaders will, think Brexit will actually head into full swing?
Well, Maddie, it's really hard to tell because, from what we heard in this released document, they're saying it could be another 6 months while, British Parliament was telling everyone that these plans were in way and they were moving forward. But, Britain always does have 2 years to really set these plans in stone. So, it's tough to say.
Thank you so much. City Councilor Tito Jackson is reaffirming Boston as a sanctuary city in response to President-elect Trump's policies on deporting illegal immigrants. Jackson says that Boston should not participate in mass deportations and has made it clear that he actively disagrees with Trump's immigrant agenda. According to Jackson, Boston is a welcoming city and will not participate in mass incarceration or deportation of immigrants in order to keep the city compassionate. Though Boston has been a sanctuary city since the Trust Act was passed in 2014, he wanted to reaffirm their position after Trump's 60 Minutes interview, where he claimed he will deport 2 to 3 million immigrants with a criminal background.
We are now joined at the desk with correspondents Brian Daniff and Carly Wickham, as well as our political correspondent Shayna Ferreira and political commentator Paul Ross to discuss Jackson's upcoming mayoral campaign. Now, Shayna, I'm going to start with you. Do you think Jackson has a chance of beating Mayor Marty Walsh?
Well, definitely. I mean, Tito Jackson has had a long history in politics, especially within the city of Boston. He was responsible for a lot of the initiatives that still to this day impact the most marginalized communities within the city, specifically the immigrant community and often people of color, communities of color, specifically in the Dorchester neighborhood. I mean, for example of that is the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Authority. I mean, he played a role in allowing people of color to have the potential to own a home and, in neighborhoods where generally they wouldn't be able to otherwise. So he's played a role in, a lot of the grassroots movements that we've been seeing in Boston. And I think that because he has that backing, I mean, he has a really good chance of at least standing beside Walsh as a viable candidate for the mayor of Boston.
Great. And now let's turn to you, Paul. Now, Tito Jackson has been part of the Boston City Council since 2011. Do you think that's enough time to sort of compare to Marty Walsh, mayor who is relatively liked within the city of Boston?
I think that it is relatively enough amount of time for Tito Jackson to actually make an impact within the city. And it's interesting that Boston voters, for the most part, are very liberal. However, and Tito Jackson is considered to be more liberal than Marty Walsh. However, at the same time, Marty Walsh is well-liked, as you said, and he's got a very large political infrastructure within the city of Boston, so that would be tough for Tito Jackson to overcome. However, a lot of people will go and support Tito Jackson because of how different he is within the city.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Now, going back to Obama's press conference yesterday, the president also paid tribute to award-winning political reporter and former co-host of PBS NewsHour, Gwen Ifill, who died Monday after her battle with cancer. PBS president and CEO Paula Kerger released a statement saying that the journalist was surrounded by her friends and family at the time of her passing. Ifill was known for her success as a woman of color in a field dominated by white men, according to the New York Times. The political reporter has moderated 2 vice presidential debates, as well as working for the Washington Post, the New York Times, and NBC News. And she will be greatly missed.
She will definitely be very missed. Coming up after the break, our sports correspondent Brian Daniff will have the latest on who will replace David Ortiz as the Red Sox designated hitter.
And weather correspondent Christina Gesford will have your 5-day forecast. Don't go anywhere.
Started!
Welcome back. We're now joined for one final time by Christina Gesford for a look at the 5-day forecast. Let's see what the weather has in store for us in the next few days. We'll see if it's, if it's going to be nice out. It's been very, very chilly in these past few days, but then it got a little warmer, so we got to turn to Christina, see what's going on.
Maddie, Rob, we're getting a little bit of everything this week, but we are consistently seeing unseasonably warmer temperatures in the mid to high 50s. Keep in mind the average this time of year is only 52, so we're above that through the start of the weekend. Clouds will be moving back in on Saturday, but the temperatures will stay in those comfortable mid 50s. But take advantage of that beautiful start to the weekend because there is a pattern change Sunday into Monday with a storm, and that's going to bring colder air, so temperatures will likely drop to and stay in the 40s. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks so much, Christina, and we definitely will take that nice weather for this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds good to me. And now to keep you up to date with everything you need to know this week, here's Brian Daniff with your sports update.
Well, guys, with the World Series over, Major League Baseball's award season is in full swing, and last night, Corey Seager and Michael Fulmer were named the NL and AL Rookies of the Year, respectively. The 22-year-old Seager played an amazing shortstop for the Los Angeles Dodgers this summer, hitting .306 with 193 hits, including 26 home runs and a whopping 40 doubles. The 23-year-old Fulmer was an absolute beast on the mound for the Detroit Tigers, going 11-7 with a 3.06 ERA in 159 innings. Fulmer was acquired from the Mets last season in exchange for Yoenis Cespedes, so keep an eye on which prospects get traded this winter. And early in the offseason, there are little signs pointing to who will replace David Ortiz as the Red Sox designated hitter. One of their targets, Kendrys Morales, signed a 3-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays over the weekend, and the Sox reportedly have not yet talked to slugger Edwin Encarnacion. Former New York Yankee Carlos Beltran is also available, as well as Mark Trumbo, who hit 47 home runs with the Baltimore Orioles last season. There are certainly a lot of options for the Red Sox, but they won't be available much longer. And finally, Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson has joined a team of investors looking to bring an NBA and NHL arena to Seattle. Wilson's goal? To revive the Seattle Supersonics, who relocated to Oklahoma City and became the Thunder after the 2008 season. Wilson became a fan of the Sonics by playing as the team in the video game NBA Jam and said, quote, "The NBA needs that green and gold back, and hockey too." Back to you guys.
All right, thanks so much, Brian. President-elect Donald Trump named 2 new appointees on Sunday. He appointed GOP Chairman Reince Priebus as Chief of Staff and Trump's campaign CEO and Executive Chairman of Breitbart News, Steve Bannon, as Chief Strategist and Senior Counselor. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan recommended Priebus as a way for Trump's administration to work with Congress, who had previously not supported Trump.
Priebus had worked with Trump throughout his campaign, from building party unity and support for Trump to helping Trump prepare for the debates. Bannon's appointment represents Trump's outsider base. His right-wing news site has been associated with discussing nationalist policies, conspiracy theories, and has been accused of posting racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic content.
To discuss this, we again are joined at the desk with correspondents Brian Daniff and Carly Wickham, as well as our political correspondent Shana Ferreira and political commentator Paul Ross.
Now, Carly, let's turn to you first. What do you think of the public's reaction to Bannon and Priebus being appointed to these positions in Trump's staff?
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that both liberals and more conservative voters are a little bit nervous about it. I think they were expecting more moderate people to be in Trump's cabinet and in Trump's administration because they were, ready for him to kind of be ready to balance it out. But he simply has not done so. He's gone for people that are strictly very conservative, and that's even honestly worrying some conservatives.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for EIV News. So,
no worries.
Just kidding. We're going to turn now to you, Brian. Now, there are a lot of people on the... Check us out online at EIVnews.com. That's all the time we have for tonight. I'm Maddie Crichton.
And I'm Rob Way. Good night.